We are the Societal Lens, and here I am with Charlie, Julia, and myself, Aidan. Today, as the Conclave Group, we will be discussing growing up as a student in a capitalistic society.
Gotta start with what do we all... Okay, before we start, what do we all think capitalism is? I'll go with Aidan, you go first.
Well, I'd say capitalistic society is the idea of the exploitative system of the the middle class, of the working class, for high profits. Charlie?
I agree. I don't have much else to add, because that sounds quite accurate.
Yeah, because to me, capitalism, at least in the very caricatured sense, was always the big rich people oppressing the working class and the factory workers.
Yeah, I agree. But also, I think that, as Rachel said, is that the middle class, the wealthy, which are a much smaller proportion of the group. The poor people are much more proportionate of larger society than the wealthy are.
Do you think in today's society the middle class could be considered part of the bourgeoisie in capitalism?
Yeah, well, it's kind of old term in Marxist theories, but...
Well, because I think in those days, did the middle class exist particularly?
Well, that's what Marx kind of argued.
Yeah.
He argued the middle class wasn't a thing, but it did exist in common day culture. But he wrote in 1848, so it is a very old theory. But I would say middle class is now starting to creep in, but not to the point that they are at the peak of wealth. The bourgeoisie, millionaires, billionaires, even trillionaires.
In our generation, middle class has had a big moment, especially with the housing crisis in 2008. I don't remember whether that led to more people owning houses, but I assume it would because prices dropped.
Yeah, I mean, it's complicated because is owning a house part of the bourgeoisie?
No, but I'd say owning a house is part of being middle class.
Yes, I agree with that. And yeah, I think a lot more people are middle class as well. The middle class has gotten a lot bigger, but that's only really in the UK. But in other countries, it's not really the exact same.
Pleasantries aside, what actually is capitalism, Charlie?
Right. Some of the most important aspects of a capitalist system are private property, private control of the factors of production, accumulation of capital, and competition. So a lot to do with market forces.
Yeah, so England and the UK is quite capitalist. We have our free markets and we have our stock markets and
privatization of housing, which is probably upon Engels' theory, which is really an older theory. However, it's quite relevant because the idea of that the wealthy can pass on housing is something we didn't even talk about.
And I think especially with the growth of social media among Gen Z and our generation, we are the first generation to have capitalism and capitalist values pushed on us through the media of advertising through television on such a scale that we've seen it, because everyone has a phone, everyone has access to social media, everyone's kind of being pushed on these types of advertising by company and brands all the time.
And I think we also starting now to notice that, even in the education system, we start talking about capitalism as a thing, and that how we are now developing more knowledge of it, but are we even able to do anything about it is the unfortunate thing.
So how does capitalism relate to the education system?
I am so glad you asked. It's common knowledge that there are different kinds of schools.
Really?
Since
yes,
when?
Really?
Since the Butler Act of 1944. I'm a history student, I should know this.
Julia already knows more of this than I do with that one singular sentence. So there are public schools, state schools?
Yes.
Okay.
A common misconception is that public schools are state schools, but that's not true. Public schools in the UK mean the big fancy ones like Eton or Harrow, the all-male ones where all the people go around in boater hats.
So even with public schools that you would expect to be sort of more for everyone, even that is a higher standard.
Yeah, because you'd expect there would be no, there shouldn't be any discrimination in education in England, considering that every child should get the same quality of education. But if you go to public school or fee-paying schools like private schools, then you are inherently given a better education due to the funds that are supplied to these places. And then there are state schools and grammar schools, which are the slightly lower class ones, and that's, yeah.
Yeah.
But it's also interesting, the ideology of how education has changed, from how we changed to the idea of academies were very popular in the 1980s or something, wasn't it? Might be wrong in the years, but how we've changed education to get to the point that we are. We're still trying to improve it, but we still haven't able to completely improve it.
Because, like, I assume the way capitalism directly links into education is the fact that you can pay for this higher education, and the fact that these schools are then seen as such, like, a distinct marker of class.
Yeah, it's seen as a service that you can buy as sort of like an added-on part of life rather than something that everyone should equally deserve.
It becomes commercialised, becomes a product rather than a service that I personally think that everyone should be entitled to.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And something really wild is that private schools, they're like really big, the big boy schools. Private schools do not have to pay tax because they are considered charities, which means that they can spend more money on other expenses, such as private tutoring and better teachers, obviously.
And additionally, there's an inherent class divide in grammar schools as well, because you're more likely to get into a grammar school if your parents can pay for tutors to help you pass the 11 plus, which people still take, though not compulsory, as it was back in the day. And so you see a disproportionate amount of middle and upper class students in grammar schools as compared to state school children, because if you're working class, you can't really afford to send your kid to, like, private tutors to up their, like, intelligence or their knowledge to help them pass the 11 plus or their SATs.
Yes, this need for tutors on, like, such a wide scale really shows a lot, because it shows that just going to school isn't enough anymore if your school is, like, too low on this ladder.
I mean, that leads to the idea of a material deprivation for the working class, but as well as just the education system in private schools is able to fill all the needs, but in working class situations, it's unable to. The amount of times that we've been told how many times you need to do extra reading, extra get the textbooks, we can't really always do that with the working class, but the middle class and upper class can.
I think there's definitely, like, growing up there was a certain sort of resentment that was pushed onto us as a result of that as well, because I don't know, like, about you guys, but I was, like, very much, when growing up, even in secondary school, I was still going to a state school, I dislike the private school that's near us, just because that was a value that was pushed. I was like, oh, we shouldn't like this school.
The socialization into the rivalry.
They look so nice, they have all this nice stuff, and, like, if you want that nice stuff, you can buy it yourself. You have to work for that as a child. And
so it's like these values of consumerism and of, like, if you have more money, you can get better things. That's pushed on us from, like, a very long age, even through our education system, which very much helps, like, indoctrinise us into following, like, society's values in this way.
Yeah, the socialisation of the mainstream norms and values that we try and encourage, like, even just the school system with the uniforms and just our schedules, it is so reflective of that of the workforce. I think Bowles and Genters discussed that, but it's the idea that we are just socialised into this workforce and eventually are going to just be part of capitalist society.
Because briefly dipping into personal experience, my brother was sent to a private school and I was not. So, like, because, like, he was then sent to this private school, I don't know if it's as a result, but he got, like, he got into college and he's now at uni. But I feel like our educations were vastly different because we kind of grew up in a way as different classes. Because while he went to private school, I went to our state school, and so, like, he went on, like, these skiing trips and got, like, tutoring outside of school, and I kind of just didn't get all of that. So I had, like, that class resentment in my home because it was really weird because, like, my grandparents paid for my brother to go to this private school, so he would then be considered, like, this, like, middle or upper class, when I, by comparison, kind of probably wouldn't be as much.
This, like, difference in class is actually really interesting, and it is also, in a way, reflected in the use of uniforms. Me and Aidan talked quite a bit about uniforms before Julia got here, actually.
Without me!
So sorry.
So
I know you love talking about school uniforms. I know it's, like, one of your biggest interests.
The duo in a trio, honestly.
Yeah, sorry, you're just going to have to third wheel on this uniform talk. But something, I'm not sure if all schools are like this, but, like, school uniforms, they cost a lot. I remember just to get one of everything, like, you know, the trousers, a shirt, a jumper and a blazer, it can cost over £100. And obviously, as children grow up, they grow out of it, and then, like, over the course of, like, the whole secondary school and maybe even A-level experience, that could be £300. And that's not even counting the fact that because a lot of these clothings are made out of cheap and uncomfortable materials, you might have to replace them. But like, a lot of people don't. People don't have the money for that. You just have to deal with it.
I think that very much links into fast fashion, which I think Aidan was looking into, and because like as a generation we've been raised with the emergence of these new shopping giants like Shein and like Temu and all this like cheaply priced fashion.
A slight side tangent. This was still in primary school, but did anyone else have like, when you had school shoes, your family like would not replace it until it was literally coming off your feet? Like I remember
That's so real.
the soles of my shoes had to actually come off completely before I got new school shoes like that, and it wasn't because of anything but the fact that the more you wait to get the next one, the better quality shoe you could get, and a lot of people don't experience it that same way.
I mean, even currently, my school shoes are very much broken. If you can see them, there's like the bottom of the foot is just really broken and hurts at some points. But I don't really want to buy a new pair for 3 months, 4 months. I'm almost done. When am I ever going to use them again?
When I went to get this is somewhat unrelated to the whole capitalism or class thing, but when I went to get a new pair of school shoes.
Let's wait for a second, just because of background noise. You got yourself a new pair of school shoes.
But yeah, when I got a new pair of school shoes, when I went for the next time, I literally just got the same pair, but like slightly bigger. And that's just, I thought that was fun because like they were cheaper, they looked cool, and I was like, I don't want to learn how to do lasers.
Do you guys remember? You might not, because this was like there was a trend in primary school. I'm not sure if this was just my school or anyone else.
Lolly Kellys?
You know those shoes that opened up on the inside and there could be a doll stored in the like soles of the shoes? Right, there was some girls in my school that had them. And
was it
a
like the
small thing.
octopus thing?
No, they were just like these small dolls, and people could open up the. Maybe their shoes just broke and they put them there.
In my school, the big thing, the trend was lights on the bottom of the shoes that like flash when you walk, and I wanted them more than anything else in the world. And then when I finally, and when my mum finally went, yeah, you can have them, my feet were too big, and I was really, really sad.
I remember when I was a kid, we had the idea of like these defying gravity branded shoes, and they're like also glowing as well. And everyone was like, you want them, and they never worked, but we always like, this is what we need. And none of us wanted it when we got them.
Anyone remember the Smiggle obsession?
Like,
the
goodness.
Smiggle pencil cases, the Smiggle they had to be like banned at a certain point because there were just so many.
We'll
of them.
talk about this more when we get on to overconsumption, but back to
hell
fashion
yeah.
briefly before we all get too caught up in nostalgia.
We talked about, me and Aidan, just talk about that, but like it's to present as more formal, and for a lot of lower to middle class people, dressing like that is really unfamiliar and can sort of take away a lot of authority.
Yeah, which is the idea of nutty culture, which is a term which is coined by Arch, I believe, and she argued that we have the idea of middle class clothing is very different to the working class clothing, and as you said, it's very not representative of them.
There used to be a quite literal marker of what class someone was. Like, oppression was so much easier back in the old days.
We should go back to like hat sizes.
Literally, there were hats, but that's how people knew what class you were, because it's to do with the hat you wore. So the upper class wore top hats. If you were middle class, you had a little bowler hat, and if you were a little peasant scum, you wore your flat cap. What's really weird is in recent years, like the flat cap has kind of been gentrified.
Yeah.
So like old farmers wear it. But onto fast fashion. If you want to use my notes or I want to use my notes, either way.
I mean, with fast fashion, it's been about such an increase, as you've mentioned, with companies such as Shein, with very poor labour conditions, with very poor and harmful conditions to the environment. It's become like 10% of global carbon emissions, which, if you don't know, is an extreme amount.
It's probably quite a lot, yeah.
It is. I mean, global warming is at the rate of unredemptional at this point, that if with this 10% just being fast fashion, it's quite harmful. I mean, especially with fast fashion, with increasing nowadays being required, we are more reliant on it as we see trends, and as capitalism has caused us to be the norm of, we want to buy these trends.
Yeah, because the top 100 corporations are responsible for apparently 71% of global emissions, which is definitely a problem when it comes to like the environment and when it comes to fast fashion, because considering fast fashion is 10% of that, it means that all the trends that we see on like the internet and just general social media, we're like, oh my god, I need that thing, and so many people are like, oh my goodness, we need that thing, and so they buy it for really cheap off somewhere like Shein or Zara, wear it like once, decide they hate it quite rationally.
It always is quite bad quality.
And then it gets like thrown away, and then that leads to a lot of these things going to landfill. And from what I've read, there are like 100 billion garments annually that are made. If you think that there's like 8 billion people on the planet, we don't need that many, and a lot of them get discarded, which leads to places like the Atacama Desert in Chile becoming a dumping ground for like clothing and electronics. Have any of you guys ever like bought something just because you saw everyone else had it, or like because of trends?
I would, but I'm too poor for that one, so no. But I have always wanted to do that, but it's just like the accessibility was just never available for me. But if I could, I would have.
I personally am not sure. I prefer to stick to the very specific stuff that I liked personally, which was usually like just whatever was on the shelf at Poundland. and like, you know, and sometimes if I wanted to be real fancy and I begged my dad, I could get something from Wilko's. And that was a good day.
Because I remember I was going about my day, and I saw a lot of people were wearing like kind of cargo pants. And so I bought cargo pants just because I saw everyone else had them, and I was like, oh, they're really cool, I should probably get some.
Okay.
Or like, and that very much comes with like a vibe of needing to have something to fit in socially, needing to have this product to fit in socially, and that's very like a kind of class conscious thing.
I think as time changed, the way I view that stuff changed as well, because when I've seen people wear certain styles on the internet, now that has sort of made me want to go, oh, I kind of want to buy that. Like, sure, it's £150, but like a part of me goes, oh, but what if, you know?
People need to understand that I don't care how much fast fashion is, Y2K does not need it to come back.
What I was going to say is that what that links into is that with the rise of the internet, people see more and more stuff, and more trends arise, particularly from people that can afford those trends. And oh my god, now I'm thinking of the Stanley Cup thing.
Oh no! But
I hate that so much.
But I mean, just even the idea of like this globalization of like the world and stuff, it has led us to with increasing carbon emissions of clothing. But we also have to think of the other effect of how are we making these clothing. The idea of the product we use as being often cotton or other materials. We need agriculture for that, and like nowadays, 80% of our deforestation is just for agriculture, which releases and causes so much globalization and global warming to us to be in common day society. But as you said, like fast fashion and like just trends are fast and going. With the Stanley Cup, with metals being needed and stuff like that, the mining is producing mass amount of acids and chemicals, and we can't really solve those issues.
Could they seriously not just like keep their drink in a normal water bottle? What was wrong with normal water bottles?
Literally, I don't get it. And they get all kinds of like things to accessorize their Stanleys. They get multiple Stanleys. They are selling Stanley's Christmas ornaments for the trees. Why do you need a water bottle hanging from your Christmas tree? I saw them in like
Urban Outfitters recently, and I'm like, no. Jesus Christ.
It's concerning, because it's alright to have a hobby where you collect things, but a water bottle isn't the kind of thing that's like healthy. These trends of just household items being collected isn't healthy. It's the hoarding to a certain extent. Oh my god, sorry. I'm thinking about food refills, like fridge and customers. Like, oh my god.
The thing is, this problem is not unique to our generation, but I think it's definitely the first where it's like been growing at such an exponential rate. Because like back in the day, in the 1920s, there was like huge boom of like higher credit and like overconsumption, and it's part of what caused the Great Depression in like the early 30s. But the problem with that was it did cause a global economic recession, because there was a lot of overproduction, because supply and demand was completely out of control. There was a lot of demand and a lot of supply, but when the demand went down, the supply did not. And that's happening with a lot of brands, again, on the apps, especially with like Shein or Amazon or literally any company, because the demand still goes down, but everyone's just waiting for like the boom again. but it's not going to happen. So that means we have loads of these clothes just lying around, and it means that if you go on Vinted, you'll see about 10 copies of the same top.
I mean, it's just an interesting comparison, but when we were young, like 2010 as well, do you guys remember like the YouTube video of eating this amount of food or wasting this amount of carbs or destruction or whatever? The overconsumption of that, we were taught at a young age, oh, that's normal.
It's been glamorized. It's been glamorized. Like, it's like, wow, that's so cool. I'd quite like to talk about consumerism in our generation these days, in this modern earth. Don't you yay?
I'll yay all I want to. I'll laugh through the pain.
I think that you probably were exposed to quite a lot of advertising, even if you did skip all of them.
Aimed at me specifically.
Because you claim something and I don't believe you. Because children learn lots of logos before they can even read. Because think like McDonald's and Netflix. You see use toys specifically to attract children with their little boxes and they're like, oh my god, it's a Pokemon. And that encourages brand loyalty because it means that the children will want to keep going back to McDonald's to get the McDonald's toys because they're always collectibles and they're always set. So you got to catch them all, as it were, trademarked. Do you guys have any brand loyalties that you think you have? So like in your family, is it like a specific brand that you go to just as like principle?
I mean, I'm going to talk about that, but as well, it's just the idea of
IKEA.
IKEA. But
definitely.
when I when I got that strawberry shortcake, I did watch strawberry shortcake, but because of McDonald's, I watched strawberry shortcake because I was like, oh, that's cool.
Strawberry shortcake is for the real ones.
Yeah, but like I would only buy specific soap companies' products, or I'd only buy specific hair products, whatever it was. I'd only buy from one brand. Mainly it was the cheapest brand as well. But
I have in my family we have a very the Apple Samsung divide. That's a very kind of clear example of brand loyalty because in my family we're Androids, we're strictly Android, don't like Apple, stay away from Apple.
We're Samsung.
Loyalties. What are you?
My family has a really technical way of going about something. Whenever we buy anything technology related, there is a full hour we spend online going through so many reviews and what each thing is able of doing. So we always go with whatever seems like the best because, as I said, we don't buy stuff unless we feel like we have the money for it and we can spend on it. So we want to make sure we get the best quality out of what we're buying. Yeah, because
that's the smart thing to do. Whereas me and Aiden, I don't feel like we have the same.
No, I did.
The same.
When I bought my computer, I remember going in every single one and comparing. I made charts because I need the best one for money. I work too much for
this. podcast is just me slowly revealing that I am in fact the bourgeoisie. Where's Sam or Haley? I need one of them here to make me look less of a middle class twat.
But on the broad that we talk about families, the idea of families in capitalism is actually quite important because families are the first part of any person's life. It's your socialized with a baby into the family, your family's norms, your family's values. It's all part of capitalism society. But when you're so young, often parents have to work, and we all know how expensive daycare is. Do you want to guess how much it is per day?
£80? Higher or lower than £80?
Much higher.
210.
Whoa. Less. It's around 160.
Straight medium.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly 80, double it.
Double it and give it to the next one.
Mr. Beast. Oh. No, but family is such an expensive part that just reinforces the idea of capitalism. The commodification
of family, as it were. Because, even when not in daycare, apparently 90% of children from 2 to 11 watch daytime TV, which, if you ever remember watching TV, what it means is, if a lot of, these children watch TV and daytime TV this constantly, there are always, these huge ad breaks that you'd have to sit through before you could get back to your, I don't know, Paw Patrol. I don't know what children watch.
Cocomelon.
No. I like to think
before you could get back to, your CBBC or whatever.
In the Night Garden. Wait, no, that's that.
That's our generation.
Yeah, or before you could get back to In the Night Garden. And it means that all these children, watching these adverts that, subtly reinforced kind of consumerist values, oh, you should buy this. And a lot of them targets, children's insecurities as well, which, because, they imply that, products will lead to social acceptance. Back to Smiggle.
Yeah.
Do you remember how cool you were if you had Smiggle?
Okay, I want to bring this up because I think this can be linked to capitalism really easily. Tweens are gone. Once you get to the age of around 10, a lot of children already want to be acting like adults because they feel things like Smiggle that we considered to be the coolest thing ever when we were 10, they'd consider it cringe. They want to buy makeup products.
Even when I was in Cardiff the other day, there was literally like 5-year-olds in crop tops, and that's something that for our generation would never have flown, but nowadays it is, and it's very interesting to see how that generational shift has happened.
Because, like, I think one thing that kind of showed to me that at least consumerism in terms of smiggle was bad. I didn't directly have that realization. I was 12, but like subtly. Was I bought like a Smiggle backpack in like year 5, and I thought I was the coolest kid in school, and I was for about 2 years. And then when I went into secondary school, like some boys kind of just like pushed, like I was in year 7, I was in line, and some boys pushed me and like making fun of my backpack, and I was like, oh, but I bought this backpack and it was supposed to be really cool. And it kind of shows that, like, again, with products, it's implied that through advertising and through like word of mouth, that buying these products and having these products will lead to social acceptance, and you want to buy things that will give you social acceptance. But materialism is inherently linked to lower self-esteem and higher rates of depression in like kind of older kids and older teens, and all these parents are being like pressured to buy things for their children, and to get like the latest things that don't get like bullied or anything.
But only off the idea of that she's talking about this TV shows in reinforcing consumerism. However, it also shows how this consumerism actually develops. Have you ever watched a show where daddy is going to work and mommy is going home, say mom, she's looking after the kids, dad's staying at work, he's getting the money, breadwinner ideology. It's very common.
So many children's shows follow that sort of, like, Disney. I didn't have Disney Channel, but like, I'm aware of Disney Channel shows. Didn't that always have that similar sort of structure? Like,
well, like, because even in like in the cartoons, like The Simpsons, Homer Simpson is depicted as being like the most incapable man alive, but he's still the breadwinner. Marge is still the stay-at-home mum, even though she's widely demonstrated to be more capable at the two parents.
I even think younger shows, which I might be wrong on this one, but Peppa Pig, I think, in early days would show daddy going to work, but mom was never shown.
Ooh, however, there's that rabbit mother thing.
Yeah.
And she has like 50 jobs.
There is, but I think,
she works everywhere.
But I think that's, I don't know, but I think it is quite interesting because Miss Rabbit isn't really a main character. It's shown as this is the side.
Oh yeah, like this is the normal family.
Like these,
and then these weird people at the side also exist, by the way.
well, yeah, I'm going to talk about the nuclear family there, which is how we are stereotyped into this mother, father, 2 kids. We all thought that that's the stereotype family. If you don't have that, it's a bit weird, isn't it?
It is, yes. Did any of you have like the mother, father, 2 kids thing? You didn't.
I did.
Really siblings.
I mean, I do.
You do.
Yeah, I've got an older sister, my dad, and my mother.
I did briefly as well.
Well, my parents had me, and then they moved here, and they divorced. So
yeah, they realised
They had one, and that was enough.
they had one and realised the error of their ways.
yeah.
But the idea of also has leads to the idea of a warm bath theory, which is a sociological idea and theory, which I don't know if any of you have heard of.
Why would I have heard of something
Didn't
called
think so, that's how I explain it.
the warm bath theory?
Well, warm bath theory is the idea of that we're quite exploited in the workforce, and often that you go to work, it's shit, we all hate it, and then we go back home, and the family's like, we get the care, we get the nurturing, we can talk about how bad our day was. Often there's kind of the idea of family, and that kind of lets us constantly go back to work and reinforces capitalism society. Because even though society sucks, at home it's fine.
It's like a sedative. So as long as we're nullified by these products and these advertisements and these promises of social acceptance, we won't notice our rights slowly being stripped away from us like rats in a lab.
It's like a really elaborate trap, and we're already inside, and we know we're in it.
We're the rats.
But how do you escape?
Yeah, there's not really much that we can do, especially considering like how much power these large companies have. But like, at the same time, historically, lower classes have been capable of making a difference. I just feel like people have become sort of discouraged from it so much they forget it's an option.
And like briefly back onto the education thing, I think that's definitely been reinforced in our schools, not just through like kind of private schools and like pay to win, but also through our education system, because we're taught explicitly that any deviation from capitalism and any deviation from the norm has historically ended badly.
Yeah.
Which they're not wrong, but which like they're not inherently wrong. But the way that it is taught means that any like especially in like America, any deviation from capitalism is seen as like a very evil thing, and that we definitely saw that off the back of the Cold War, because none of us were born when that was happening, but we're in post-Cold War society, and what that means is anything that's like communist or socialist is frowned upon because like our parents had like years of propaganda telling them how awful communism was and how great capitalism was. So we've all been kind of like sorry, I'm aware. Communism is like it didn't end well.
I know.
But that's because I want to make this absolutely clear. What happened in the Soviet Union was not true communism. It was Stalinism, which is entirely different, and anyone who says otherwise can fight me. But yes.
But
not communism. Thank you.
But as you talk about the idea of this communist society, if we were to solve capitalism and have this revolution, which Karl Marx predicted in 1850s, 1848 actually, what would we do? What is this perfect society? Is it actually communism? But we've never been able to succeed at it.
Yeah, because
what do we want?
We've discussed all these problems that come with like capitalism and growing up under capitalism, and like the inherent like insecurity about class and wealth and products and consumerism and money and the environment, etc., 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 etc. But are we they won't educate us on the alternatives? No one's ever really like. What are the alternatives?
Are there alternatives? Has anyone ever thought of it? Is the question. And to my knowledge, I don't think there is.
Even in the research for this podcast, none of us took the initiative to go, oh, let's look up some alternatives. We're like,
we don't have.
Yeah, we just believe that this is the only way we can live.
Yeah, I think I mentioned this before, where it's like we're so used to this being the reality. I'm remembering what we learned in philosophy with the turkey, where it's like, the sun goes up. About how the turkey believes that it'll be fed every day because it's been fed every day before, and that's its reality until Christmas Day, where
it's murdered.
Capitalism has such a big control of our lives, especially with all these big corporations owning everything, that we've never even considered what would happen if we did something differently.
Because it keeps us prisoner at the end of the day. Because we've got to go to school, but we're not going to school to enrich our lives. We're going to school so we can get a job. We're getting a job so we can have money, which doesn't exist really. We're getting a job so we can have money. We have money so we can pay the government for our right to live.
Yeah, into taxes.
So we're essentially it's pay to live, which is odd because in even in the feudal system and before the golden era of capitalism in the 1950s, before I'd say even in the Middle Ages and pre-Middle Ages, that's not how the system worked. It was sort of like a barter economy, or even the feudal system where money as a concept wasn't used in it wasn't weaponized in the way that it is today.
I mean, in the UK, we have the welfare state, which I'm not going to say is the solution to capitalism, and it has solved every problem. Has solved its problems, but the generosity of the welfare state is much more than many of the societies in our world in the UK.
The socialist aspects we've implemented in the UK, including the welfare state, has definitely been one of the reasons why I think we're so privileged to live where we do.
Yeah. Because
in America, which is, I'd argue, the capitalist country of the world, is you've got to pay for healthcare, which in this country is insane. But it's only insane because we've implemented the socialist position of the NHS and seen this is really great.
I mean, even our politics our probably far right is more leaned to the Central Party of America to an extent with ideologies and beliefs. It's so very different because we are one of the most socialist countries in the world.
The thing is, countries with, I wouldn't argue that, but countries with differing from just mainstream capitalism, so more socialist values. So let's say kind of the Scandinavian countries and the UK, we have higher ratings on the happiness index and the development index than these big capitalist conglomerates like the US, and I think that what does tend to happen is in countries that don't follow capitalism as monoliths, like Vietnam, which is one of the last officially communist but not really countries that we have, the difference is, while they don't rank high on GDP, if in terms of national happiness and social welfare, they tend to be higher on the ranks than if you than big capitalist countries like the US.
I mean, even going to the idea of China, which is quite a capitalist country, large profits, very focused on industry, we have companies that are just so cruel with low working labour conditions. With China literally having, is it a 48-hour workday? I mean, China companies literally take your ID away from you. China has a rural and urban ID as well to divide people base of their class.
Which is really odd considering they're ran by, again, a supposedly communist party, which once again is not an example of true communism and is a mockery to Marx.
Yeah, because Marx.
If you can't tell, I dislike countries that claim to be what they're not. So all of them.
The thing was, like we said, China is a communistic country, but supposedly it has very many capitalistic ideologies in its company, in its workforce, with even companies, I think Apple, having suicide nets due to the poor conditions, just because of how unhappy people are, that death is better than working there, and they can't leave the company because they have no ID.
And I do wonder going into, because like some of us are adults now.
Yeah, I'm almost an adult in a month or two.
We're like, some of us are adults now, some of us are nearly adults. I'm wondering as like we reach this age and we go into the workforce, because we're already in the workforce. Right?
Yeah.
When we go into kind of the adult workforce, I do wonder how, 'cause in our generation, Gen Z is seen as very like woke and very progressive and very almost anti-capitalist. And I do wonder if once we're in government that will change with like the development of new policies or like the abandonment of the system together, which is unlikely considering the amount it's taken to build said system. But it can all come tumbling down so quickly.
The other thing, we're talking about politics there, is it ever going to happen with a 4-year party span? Parties need to be able to act quickly and effectively. Like, so the crime rate, we enforce prisons because it solves crime quickly, not rather solve their problem. Is anyone ever going to be able to solve capitalism within 4 years and then still being able to maintain being in party without the selfish greed of, I want to be in party?
So much of this is really just how long can we keep this going? Like, how sturdy is this going to be for people? Because
it's like, at its core, it's not sustainable, because every time we have a big market crash, like there was one in the Great Depression, there was a more recent one in 2008 with the housing crisis and the stock market crash, everyone panicked. But the problem is, everyone thinks that after a big crisis like that, it's not going to happen again, when that's not sustainable, because under capitalism, using hire purchase and using kind of like betting on the stock market, and in general, the way the system works is you cannot avoid a market collapse forever. And that means that these are going to keep happening and people are going to keep losing loads of money in their savings and like business is going to go down. And I don't know like how many of the bounces we can make before people kind of look at it and go, either we need mass reform or this needs to stop entirely.
I mean, that mass reform reflects the idea of Karl Marx, which we commonly mention because he was one of the founding fathers of modern society, which led to the idea of capitalism.
Disclosure, we do not support Marx's views on women. We like women.
No, we like women. I mean, I'll talk about women in the family as well, but with Marx, he predicted a revolution when the proletariat had enough people that realized, oh, we don't have money, we are poor, this is unfair, they will revolt and end the state of communism. But the main thing of his theories is it hasn't happened yet, and when will that ever happen is still up to question.
And I think the bottom line is we're not exactly victims either. We've all profited from the system of capitalism, and we are in itself possibly the oppressors. Just because we do live in we live in the UK. We live in one of the countries doing a lot of the environmental damage and a lot of though we have gotten better, we're doing a lot of the damage, and we started the Industrial Revolution, you know what I mean?
Yeah, we spurred it on. Without the Industrial Revolution...
we started this.
Yeah, we wouldn't have such the idea of globalization with this urban village of society of how everyone can see everything.
Yeah, so like the actions of our country have like directly impacted the futures of several like kind of African countries and just Southern Hemisphere countries in general. We've been responsible for oppressing, and still to an extent are, because while I do place the main blame on the corporations, we as people do hold a certain amount of responsibility for the overconsumption in today's society, because I think we've all done it in some way or another.
I mean, going back to the point of African countries, the amount of harm we've done as the UK, was it 1965 and some countries were freed from colonization?
It could have been.
I think Nigeria was 1965.
Most of them were directly after the war, because to win the Second World War, we kind of like gave up all the colonies.
But regardless, even if it's post-World War II or just 1960s, regardless, it still hasn't been 100 years. But countries like the UK have not been able to support those countries in enough ways that they need it. They've lost so many resources that they would need that we've just stripped and benefited for ourselves.
Yeah. So it leads to these countries like India like turning to overconsumption and turning to cheap labour and bad stability and feeding into the sickness that is capitalism to generate their economies and boost their economies, because they need to keep up with the way the world's going and they need to provide for their people. So it seems almost as if like they can't do anything else but buy into the system and generate these products, which we then buy and consume and reject, and the whole process starts over again.
Yeah, and that's extremely dangerous in some places. In Bangladesh, we have the Sundarbans, which is a mangrove, which, if we don't know, mangroves are one of the best forces to prevent storm hazards, as they are very protective of storm surges especially. They can protect civilization drastically, but the resource they provide is such an important boon for capitalism that we destroy these effortlessly, and then we wonder why we suffer the consequences.
In the same with the Amazon, and like it's agriculture and it's overproduction, it's cattle ranches, and one has to question how much capitalism is directly responsible for a lot of the problems we face.
Yeah, I mean, as you mentioned in Amazon, hack and slash burning of trees to get nutrients into soil, to then have cattle farming, is so harmful to society. Even if we're just producing simple meat, there are more substantial ways to do so.
I'm starting to think if we should just rename this podcast episode just Capitalism Thoughts. Because it's just like, oh, it's too late. The end is knee. Knee?
No.
How
far are we even?
The end is knee.
But
so, do we think... I think the companies would be more responsible, but do you guys think the companies or the consumers are more responsible?
I think the companies for the most part, but like the consumers also need to start reading things, also need to start becoming aware of how this works.
Because like I'm not completely innocent. I bought my prom dress from Shein, for example, and again they know how to make a dress, but I'm aware that it's unethical now.
I mean, when I my prom to went to the laundry to get clean. I could clean it myself, but I went to the laundry because it's much easier, much cheaper.
And in terms of what we were talking about earlier, should wealthy nations be held responsible for their environmental impacts generated by overconsumption? So should be like reparations, or are we not responsible?
Well, I'm going to lead off that question, but the difficulty is the UK, let's say for example, is a wealthy country that we are able to substantiate our impacts that we have done. But is that really that important in comparison to a country like Nigeria, which produces mass amount of oil, massive environmental conditions, but they're poor, they can't do much.
Yeah,
but they aren't able to do as much. But the UK can reduce our things much less.
I think it definitely has to do with how much certain entities are capable of changing. If an entity that, like a country or a company, is capable of making something better, they should suck it up and do it, but they're not going to.
The problem with that is a lot of companies do this thing called like greenwashing, where they falsely promote a product as eco-friendly while still pursuing extremely unsustainable and unenvironmentally friendly practices. And an example of this is Coca-Cola, who is the world's largest plastic producer with 100 billion plastic bottles made annually. And despite marketing campaigns that claim sustainability, they make limited progress in fixing this issue, and they're still the world's largest plastic producer. And also, I see it in, with McDonald's, a lot of times environmental sustainability under capitalism is discouraged by upping prices and pricing it out. So like the vegan options, they're more expensive, all these plant dishes, they're more expensive because they're branded as eco-friendly and sustainable. And it means that a lot of working class or ordinary people are then priced out of these alternatives. And that's seen on a global scale as well, again with countries like with Nigeria, when they need to sell their oil to develop their economies, because just being sustainable won't help them economically.
I mean, even the idea of the vegan food options, that's even being classed out to the middle class at points. It's that expensive that it's unsustainable. The idea of organic food as well, just we can't substantially sustain it.
And there's a whole kind of culture against vegans as well, which I don't know how much that links to capitalism, but I'm definitely a perpetrator of. And it's just at a certain point you do have to think how much of that is because we have been raised on kind of the meat industry, and the meat industry does not want to lose our business.
The meat industry.
The meat industry, yeah.
Yeah, but the meat industry is one of the biggest that we have nowadays. With how many brands of meat are there that all make millions, billions, so often and so quickly? But do we have anything else we want to talk about?
The animals are seen as an infinite money glitch to certain people. They'll just breed more of themselves. It's
like in Minecraft when you just
yeah.
just feed them.
But I mean, even just agriculture is seen as quite a thing we can just consistently do. But if we farm on the same state of land, that land is going to be destroyed to the point of over-farming of nutrients that we cannot solve it. and that areas of soil are just ruined. I mean, even just globalization, the impacts of like Chernobyl soil is one of the best soils in the Ukraine, is now being destroyed because of wars, just due to conflicts between like wealth in such countries.
This is just a fun fact for general knowledge in the audience, but the Ukraine is actually a term used to kind of disagree that Ukraine is an actual own country. So like the Russian Federation uses like, oh yeah, when talking about Ukraine they go, oh, the Ukraine, as if it's a section of Russia, when it's not. So just call it Ukraine, because the Ukraine implies that it's not its own country.
Yeah, fair enough.
We think it is. To our best knowledge, it's correct. But if you want to do any research,
we aren't 100% true all the time, as we are often going off some knowledge of our own
because
stuff.
everyone listening as well, like we've all grown up under capitalism, and like we all have our own experiences.
We just like
And
grown up
biases.
in different parts of it. Although I have my doubts that upper class people will be listening to this.
No, yeah,
No,
not our
but-
podcast. Because we've actually got quite a wide range here if we think about it. Because like, Aiden, you're from South Africa and
Male.
from Hungary, and I'm just from the UK. I've got no excuse. But I am the problem.
But I'm going to talk about the idea of men and women in capitalist society. And I'm going to go back all the way to the family, because
All the way to family, yeah.
going back, this is like hours ago.
Backtrack.
But the idea of like women in the household is so different in society. Women are seen as something that can benefit men, and the idea of like a father and mother role, women are often just seen as this thing of, oh, men can abuse women because I can't abuse someone in the workforce, but in the house, yeah, it's okay. That is often the cause of domestic violence.
Yeah, because we didn't get, like, even under capitalism, the further division among the working class is what stops them from becoming united. So it's why we didn't have, like, the Equal Pay Act until 1970. So, like, it's... And there are more acts and more progress that people have tried to make, but there is a question as to how much this can actually help.
I mean, like you said, the amount of women that are just, taking a triple shift, which is quite a feministic ideology of that women have to work 3 types of jobs in the household. I think Malcolm and Dunstan or something, they mentioned that to talk about how women have to work the emotional burden, the physical burden, and the economic burden. Mm-hmm. And how women aren't seen equally compared to men in modern days of capitalism.
So what have we learned? We've learned...
Not
What have
much.
we learned? I don't think it is actually entirely over. I don't think humans are gonna destroy the planet. I think we're just gonna like make it unlivable for us.
I mean,
which is okay.
I mean, we might wipe
Glaciers.
ourselves out, but we don't really have
But I mean-
ourselves to blame for that one. I swear.
the idea of those that we've lived in, not humans, but society, like the world has been around for however many
billions,
years.
like
Billions.
13.5 billion years.
Like we've had different periods, the Jurassic period, we've had the Cretaceous period, and stuff like
and
that.
it won't just be this forever, because like that's human nature. Everything changes. We've been through like the feudal system. Countries have been through pseudo-communism. They've been through fascism, but the system always changes. And I think that with this generation, we might actually see that change. It might not be us, it might be our children, but I think we will see some change in the way things are run eventually.
Just to the extent of what that change will be is up to question, I think.
Exactly. I personally am excited to find out.
Yeah,
Yay.
it's definitely exciting. I think it's equally as exciting and terrifying.
Because everything that we've been raised upon is fundamentally flawed at points.
Yeah, also fascism seems to be making a return
Yeah,
in
that's
certain
not great.
places.
That's not great.
I feel like
Yeah.
Germany will be like a pretty safe place because
will it
they
now?
seem... Yeah, because they are like really...
They're trying, but they're also having a big rise in the far right in their
Are they?
politics. We all are. It's not a great time.
Yeah, it's
I
unfortunate.
just feel like that they educate the children there a lot more on the war.
To be fair, I think I will have like, if we have like grandchildren, we're telling them, oh, but those to be I grew up under capitalism where we had to work 6 days a week for 1 day of rest, and they'll go, oh, that's insane.
Actually, can I go off
That's
that?
what we do this for.
Of the idea of the work week as being 5 days, that's actually made by capitalists to ensure, because 2 days is not enough rest for someone to be able to work again, but it's just enough rest for someone to think they have enough. So actually, it tricks you into not being ready, but you think you are.
We didn't used to have Saturdays. That's like a 20th century thing.
I mean, like society has changed. Like Sunday was God's day in the past, but nowadays we've not as religious. We don't really see Sunday in the UK as God's day. We see it as a day before school.
Yeah. I just quickly want to bring up that in countries with major religions, the people of the major religion have sort of the major religion have an advantage. In England, that is Christianity, and we have specific holidays, specific days when you don't have to go in, because it's a celebration of those religious moments.
I'm going to build off what you said about that. I wouldn't call it advantage. I'd say that capitalism is also a proponent of that, because religion and capitalism are linked a lot more closer than a lot of people would expect, because it can be, much like capitalism, it can be used to control the masses and lull them into like a false insecurity by like making them think they're going to be saved.
Yes, I also just quickly want to say that that also means though that people of other religions have a disadvantage, because they aren't given time for their own
holidays. They have to often take school off.
They have to do it like in school, so it takes some time off there, because it's not made for them. It's made for this system, and because of the prevalence of the biggest religion, they also get to have in on that, essentially.
I mean, that idea of being saved is actually, it's a Marx theory called the opium of the people. People are seen as taking drugs because big questions in society, we can't really answer what happens after death. It's not a question we can answer, but religion can provide these answers and make people be secure enough in themselves to work.
Because you can placate the masses by saying, oh, you'll be rewarded in the next life if you accept your role in society. If you accept that you're just going to be a worker forever, then you'll be rewarded in the afterlife. And the problem is there is no proof of that. So it means that all of these people for a very long time are just working and working and working, believing they're going to be rewarded, when in the end that could just not happen and they could just be exploited for the rest of their lives.
I mean, there are even religions that are just directly coinciding with capitalism. Calvinism is one of the biggest examples where people are taught be modest, but invest your money into your business. Invest into this capitalistic idea of society, and leads to people who are Calvinists often having a lot of money due to their businesses, and often has major impacts to others. Thank you again. This is the Societal Lens, and today I was with Charlie, Julia, and myself, Aidan. Thank you so much.
Marx.
He was one of our founding fathers.
He was here in spirit.
Looking upon us, probably with disappointment. But thanks so much.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye. Markets, our market stalls.
all the markets.
All the markets. I am so glad you asked.
It's almost like we planned this.
Almost.
Not quite. Public schools are state schools, because in America, like, oh yeah, we got a public school.
Yeah.
But that's not true. So we laughed too loud there.
It's fine.
But that's not true. If you were a little peasant scum, you wore your flat cap.
I have one.
I don't know how to tell you this.
We're gonna have to
Material.
we could